It's interesting, I like your DIA rules about the clipboard. The other one was when you first got there, you didn't put anything personal up.
Yeah.
Why did you not want to have anything personal
And
at work?
let me first say, I actually don't recommend that. And I'm very impressed and excited about like the movement now where I feel like women are like, no, I'm coming to bring my whole self to work, and it is what it is. I started at Combs Enterprises the week after I turned 30. And I turned 44 tomorrow. And, I was very super conscious about the fact that this was an industry where, yeah, this was a lot of celebrity. There was sometimes confusion about how women should be treated. So I was very intentional. I had not one personal effect on my desk. I was always really civil and pleasant. But as you can imagine, in this industry, there's tons of parties. But I would literally go into work like, oh, this is so fun. Excuse me. Hey, Puff, I'm going to need you to sign off on this. Yep. Oh, you have a question about that? We're up 6%. I'm back if you need me. I'm back at the office. And I think it just set the appropriate tone for the way I expected to be treated, but also just real clarity around why I belonged in that room. The nature of working with somebody like Sean is I needed to be equally as impactful, and these are like real scenarios, with the royal family in London as I would be in a studio in East New York and Brooklyn and making sure that these 15 rappers were on time for their studio session. So that requires an ability to be myself everywhere I went, but ensure that as soon as you come in, you know I mean business.
I know you mean business, I can tell. I talked a little bit about at the top what your C-suite looks like, and at Revolt Media, it's 67% people of color,
Yes.
50% of the women at the CVP level, at the senior vice president level are women. Yeah, it's really something to be proud of. What advice would you give a legacy company where something like that seems almost impossible? Or someone might tell you it's impossible, let me put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is all things are possible if you're willing to put the commensurate resources into it. Is it enormously challenging? There's no question of that. I'm sure we've all seen the research that shows basically after 150 people, right, you start to lose so much efficiency in a company. Although if you're like the federal government who has 2 million employees, it'd be difficult to have a bunch of sub-factions of 150 people. This is something that you can think about in the way you approach diversity. If you're at an organization where you need to be dedicated to it at the global level, don't get me wrong, but are there opportunities to say, how do I hyper-focus on these subsegments so that I know I'm doing it right? Mm-hmm. How do I go into my tech group and figure out how I'm really disciplined about ensuring that we have blind interviews, that we actually use AI for the initial screening so that individual bias doesn't creep into it, that we pay attention to the effect that when you have only one minority or one woman in the final hiring, well, actually, the correct stat is actually if you have one minority in the final hiring group, right, it's statistically 0% that person gets hired. If you have 2 or more for minorities, it goes up to 194 times more likely. For women, it goes up to 74 times more likely. So it's easy to say, let's have at least 2 minorities in the recruitment pool. That data bears that out. That's an easy thing that you can actually put into practice. I would also say the reality is, although workplace diversity is a huge and gaping issue in America, it is a reflection of a much larger issue. So it's hard to be diverse at work if you're not diverse at home. It's just the truth. And we all tend to self-segregate in whatever group you're in. So it is important to be intentional about creating and developing legitimate relationships across serious lines of difference. Not like a Pisces and a Libra, right? Like serious lines of difference. Because it's difficult. I've been grateful that I've been able to have relationships with, C-suite of huge multinational organizations that can pull me aside and say, like, we want to do better, but we don't know anybody else like you. And that now, I know people who'll be offended by that and say, that's a ridiculous statement, but I'm happy to have an open, clear conversation. I'll be like, I got you. What do you need? You need more? I know thousands of brilliant, I'm not a unicorn. There's a million people like me, and if you don't know them, let me be the bridge.
It's interesting. People talk about the pipeline. When you talk to people about diversity issues, a lot of times they'll say, but the pipeline. But there can be more than one pipeline. I mean, it doesn't have to just be everybody coming out of Wharton and Tuck. I mean, I think about HBCUs and Greek organizations. There's all kinds of places to recruit.
Yeah, I think the pipeline is a little bit of a misnomer, but because to your point, there are historically black colleges and universities. There are what's called the Divine Nine. If you go to the black fraternities, right, that's particularly for African Americans, but these type of things exist in every diverse segment. Again, I think you're dealing with a bigger issue, though, that there are sometimes pipeline issues, and not to, this may be a little bit of a heavy topic, but I think we need to be able to deal with these kind of things in real life. We live in a country, actually, when you look at history, one of the only countries where in times of slavery, the amount of anti-literacy laws was a real thing. Mostly everywhere else in the world, if you were in a slave population, you could still read, right? So here, from the 1400s to the late 1800s, you were not allowed to read by law. You would be potentially, That's a big deal. So there are legitimate things that this country has to kind of deal with to overcome and say well, maybe tech is not being taught at the early ages, or maybe there is a real dearth. And that's the case. What are we doing collectively to account for that, to make sure that the companies are truly diverse, which is actually just good for business? It's actually just good for profits. So it's worth, I think, the short-term appropriate level of investment for the long-term ROI, both financially, and it's also just the right thing to do for the moral fabric of the country.
Let's talk about your new business for a moment, because this is an opportunity to start a business the way you want to, and you're going into the CBD business.
Yes. So I often talk about industries and real innovation sometimes have to start from scratch, right? So we often mistake improvement for innovation. And that if you want to really build something in the right way, sometimes you just have to actually build it from scratch. Like iPhones didn't come from Palm Pilots, Netflix didn't come from Blockbuster, right? A lot of times really crazy, even the automotive industry didn't come from horses, right? So it starts a lot of times from scratch. Even though we're relatively far in the cannabis and in the US and the hemp-derived CBD business, we're already seeing that in the United States, less than 5% of dollars being made in the industry are going back into diverse communities. There are literally no women in most of the meetings that I've been in the past few years. And I felt like, this is at least a young enough industry that we could get in and make a change right now. I mentioned that my dad was a police sergeant in New York. And where he grew up, it was well known, the police would go after minorities. He actually grew up in a very anti-police environment. But he taught my family that if you want to make a change, you have to become a part of the system. It's much easier actually to change it often from within. So he started the first group under the Internal Affairs, this is in the 80s, to train officers on civility and discourse in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. In a very different way, but kind of with the same approach. It's kind of how I'm viewing the cannabis industry right now in North America. There's an exciting opportunity, an amazing opportunity in a millennium where we can actually change the future of American business, right? So if you think about what the gold rush did in terms of the railroad industry and the development of the West and how we still benefit from this day from what happened then. We're living in a time like that right now. For me, I couldn't sit on the sidelines and not jump in. But I'm equally excited about the commercial opportunity as I am about, okay, this is an opportunity where like what we did at Combs, we can be really prescriptive about ensuring that there is appropriate levels of diversity in religious identity and gender identity and in proper diversity and build it from scratch. And I've been talking to Sean about this for a year and got his blessing to move forward, and hopefully we'll be doing something cool together. And we're excited about what's to come in that space.
And what's the name of the company going to be?
Burn. The Burn Group. BRN. BRN Burn Group.
And when's your big official announcement so people can look for it?
It will be the first week of October.
All right.
Yes.
Well, we wish you good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dia.